Yeah, I think the thing that I want people to really be mindful of as they listen to this today is what they give attention to, what they pay attention to. I think there's so much going on in our lives, right? We got marriages, we got kids, we got relationships, we got jobs, we got all kinds of stuff going on, right? But I think God's really, really clear about the things that we should be paying attention to, about the things that we should be giving our attention to. And so I'm hoping that people can kind of approach this lesson thinking about that, what they give their attention to, and is it matching up with what God really wants them to be giving their attention to. So I'm excited about talking about this because I think it's something that I definitely need, and I think other people could really will benefit from it too. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about that. Well, hey there, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our online midweek. My name is K-Sam Perkins. I help lead the youth and family ministry along with the worship ministry here in the Denver church, and I'm super excited to be here. Tonight I have the honor of doing the second installment of our series on Jesus and the poor, and it's been super great. Last week we got to hear from Susan Busak and Hans Rasmussen. That was awesome. If you weren't able to watch that, I want to encourage you to take some time and download the video from last week. You can find it on our YouTube channel. I guarantee you, when you watch it, you're going to be inspired, you're going to be motivated, you're going to be excited about getting out there and really serving the poor and the needy. It's going to be awesome. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. So the other day, I was reading this article about a mom who takes her child to the swimming pool. They were actually going to a birthday party, and it was at a swimming pool. And the mom puts her daughter into the pool with a flotation device and then leaves her daughter. But the mom, as she walks away, doesn't notice her daughter flip into the water. And the baby, this 2-year-old baby, actually starts to drown in the pool. Crazy. So there's a little kid in the pool who sees this happen, and he goes and he tries to rescue the baby, but he's struggling. And the mom, she has no idea what's going on. The mom is actually on her phone, so she has no idea what's happening. The child goes to try to get the mom's attention, but the mom ignores the child, starts pushing away this little kid because they're kind of busy on their phone. So after almost 2 minutes, the mom finally looks up from her phone and she realizes that her child is drowning. Obviously, she's panicked. She's freaking out at this point. So she runs and she grabs her baby. She picks up her baby. The baby's purple and actually ends up going into a coma. It's a super sad story, really, really sad story. But what it showed me is how easy it is to get distracted and caught up with stuff that just doesn't really matter. Whether it be pleasures or problems, we can get self-absorbed. And when that happens, the consequences can be pretty serious, pretty fatal. For this woman, it wasn't that she didn't love her baby. I'm sure she loves her baby and cared for that baby, but she just wasn't really paying attention. This could have happened to anyone, to anybody. But if we can do that with people we know and love, how much easier is it to do that with people we don't know? To be consumed with ourselves, my house, my money, my social media account, my time, things that don't really matter at the end of the day. When we choose not to pay attention, the consequences can hurt. And sometimes those consequences are irreversible. We want to be a church that pays attention to what's going on around us because we live in a world where people are hurting. People aren't really paying attention. And God is calling us as disciples to listen, to pay attention, to be people that are attentive to the needs of what's going on around us because there's so much at stake if we don't. Tonight we're going to be in Luke chapter 16. Jesus is telling the story about a rich man and a beggar named Lazarus. Jesus has been talking to the disciples about using money in a way that's going to bring God glory and honor. And as God is telling, the story, there's some Pharisees who were kind of listening in. And they're kind of laughing at Jesus in a way. You know, it wasn't like Jesus was rolling in dough. He didn't have a lot of money. So who was he to be talking to anybody about how to use money? But as we know, Jesus is going to end up having the last laugh at the end of the day. So we're going to look at Luke chapter 16, and we're going to start in verse 19 and verse 21. It says, there was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. At his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs came and licked his sores. So one guy has got some deep pockets, right? He's rolling in dough. He's wearing purple and fine linens, which were signs of wealth, but he's also living this super luxurious lifestyle. You know, growing up, one of my favorite shows used to be MTV Cribs. Don't judge me. Used to be MTV Cribs. I still like going back and watching some of those shows, but I would get home and I would sit down and I would turn on the TV and you'd see a celebrity. And they'd open up the door and they open up their home and they say, come on in, come check out my crib. And you go into the kitchen, right? And they open up the refrigerator and it's full of like champagne and Gatorade. And that's like all they got. And then, you know, they take you to their bedroom. And then you look at their bathroom and it's huge. It's bigger than like my whole house, right? And then they take you into the garage and they got all these foreign cars. And it's just like, oh my goodness, like a bunch of cars. And then they take you to the backyard and you see their swimming pool and it's huge. And I'm thinking to myself, one day that's going to be me. That's going to be my life. And I can't wait, right? And I'm just, man, it would be so exciting. And I feel like that's probably what this guy's life is like. Like he's just living in luxury, right? He's got his Mercedes chariot, right? Everything is just, is great. He's got a big house. Everything looks good. And I'm sure, man, the Pharisees heard this and probably thought to themselves, man, the story's probably going to end well for this guy. He's got a pretty good life going for him. You know, a lot of Pharisees had money and considered it to be a sign of God's approval. So the more money you had, you were probably doing pretty good with God too. I think even today, there are a lot of religious leaders who are trying to gain followers through this message of prosperity, right? This message of, you know, financial wealth and health and how that's God's will for our lives as long as we obey him. And that's not necessarily the case, but there are a lot of people who believe that. I think it's easy to misconstrue or misinterpret the word of God when you're thinking about yourself and not God first. You know, in the Pharisees' eyes, the rich man's life was set. He was good to go, and they probably saw a lot of themselves in him. But outside of his nice house, his fat crib, sitting at a gate was a beggar named Lazarus. It's the only time Jesus ever named someone in a story or a parable. You know, he has an extremely rough life, like completely different than the rich guy. You know, not only is he poor, but he's covered in ulcers and sores. You know, he's hungry. It says he longed to eat the crumbs from the rich man's table, like not even the food, just the crumbs, the stuff that was falling off the table. He just wanted to eat that, right? He didn't have anybody there for him. He's just kind of there on his own. It says, you know, the dogs from the city would come and lick his wounds. Like the dogs were his best friends. Like this guy's probably miserable. His life is just, it's not good. And initially he's the one in the story that you pity. You kind of pity him. So you got the rich man who's, you know, got this amazing life, this luxurious life, and he's watching this poor beggar suffer every single day while he kind of lives his best life. And I think we can hear this and become kind of judgmental of the rich guy. And we go, man, why would he do that? Why would he do anything? But I think there are times when we can do just that. We can do exactly what the rich man does. You know, I live in a pretty diverse area in Denver. There are a lot of middle to upper class families in the neighborhoods where I live, but there are quite a few people just outside of my addition who are experiencing homelessness and poverty. My oldest son, Uriah, he's 6, and he notices these people. And I love his heart. He always asks questions. He goes, Dad, what does their sign say? Why do you think they're homeless? What do you think they need? I wish I had more of that kind of a heart, to be concerned about the needs of people. To be honest, typically we see the same people. I've kind of gotten used to seeing these people. I could probably tell you, what a lot of their signs say. It's easy to get used to seeing their signs, but not actually seeing the people. And I think sometimes for us, we can see the signs, but we don't always see the people. These are people with stories coming from situations that are unfortunate. I'm sure none of them woke up one day and said to themselves, oh, I can't wait to be homeless. I can't wait to be poor and have no money, to struggle for food and shelter every single day of my life. I can't wait. I'm sure nobody woke up and said that. They have stories. And I'm sure Lazarus had a story. But I'm pretty sure, just like many of us, the rich man never took the time to know Lazarus' story. Maybe he didn't care, or maybe he just wasn't paying attention. Well, let's continue on and see what happens next in the story. In verse 22, it says, the time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. So he called to him, Father Abraham, have pity on me, and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire. But Abraham replied, Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, while Lazarus received bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. And besides all this, between us and you, a great chasm has been set in place, so that those who want to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over from there to us. Even though these two men led very different lives, the one thing that was inevitable for the both of them was death. They both had to go at some point. I'm sure the beggar didn't have a funeral. There's probably nobody there to recognize him or acknowledge him when he passed away. Nobody there to hold him or comfort him as he took his last breath. But he was carried to Abraham's side. And Abraham's side represents blissfulness and the eternal blessing of being with God. That's pretty awesome. And what this lets me know is that God has always had a heart for the poor. And not just those who are poor financially, but for those who are poor in spirit as well. Lazarus, he had a hard life. He struggled. It was tough, right? But God wanted to be there for him. And I think about for some of us out here, if you're lonely or you're depressed or you're hurting, if this life is just a struggle, it's just hard. We serve a God who longs for the day when life will no longer be a struggle. That should give us a lot of comfort. His story ended far better than it began. Then you got the rich man. He was buried, right? He probably had a funeral. He was probably recognized by a lot of people, right? I think about some of the great people that we know of in our world today who just passed away. I think about John McCain. I think about Aretha Franklin, who had a 6-hour-long funeral. 6 hours. I mean, celebrities and family and so many people came to these funerals and recognized them. There was pomp and circumstance and lots of great words about the way these people lived their lives. And I'm sure the rich man had a similar type of a send-off. But rather than being carried to Abraham's side, he's cast into Hades, where there was torment. He couldn't take any of the accolades with him. He couldn't take any of his money with him. And at the end of the day, he's the person in the story that you pity. The rich man, the one who would have at one point been able to give help, but didn't, is now begging for comfort from the one person he saw every single day and neglected. And this would have probably caught the Pharisees off guard. They're probably like, what is going on? Jesus, I don't get this. What happened? Like, what went wrong in the story? I don't get it. I think when it's all said and done, when we go and we see God, When we approach God on that last day, I think there are going to be a lot of people who ask those questions. What happened? What went wrong? What did I miss? I don't understand. See, the Pharisees bragged about being sons of Abraham, about being these holy people. But Jesus made it super clear that their family lines and their religiosity and their money wasn't going to hold weight when it came to eternity. Didn't matter who their daddies were. It didn't matter how much Bible they knew. Didn't matter how much money they had in their wallet. The word was going to judge the thoughts and the attitudes of their hearts, just like it was going to judge everybody else's. See, the story at the end of the day, it's not about money. The story is about the heart. The rich man was being judged not for being rich, right? He was being judged for being indifferent to the needs of humanity, the needs of his neighbor. You know, a lot of times when we think about our neighbor, we think about the person that sits to our right and to our left, the person that lives to our right and to our left. That's my neighbor. But no, we know from the Bible, our neighbors are far more than just the people who live to our right and to our left, right? It's the people within our community. Our neighbors are all around us. And guess what? The poor and the needy are our neighbors. And last time I checked, Jesus has called us to love our neighbors the way that we love ourselves. So the poor are no less our neighbors than the people who live next door to us. The only thing that separated the rich man and Lazarus was a gate. Literally, a gate, like a physical gate. And you think about this. What happens if the rich man decides that he's going to see past his gate? He's going to see past his gate if he takes the time to feed and care for and comfort Lazarus, the one guy that he saw every day and could do something for. He could be a blessing to him. He could be a blessing. And this is what being a Christian is all about. It's not about being blessed, but it's about being a blessing to other people. And if you leave with nothing else, that I say tonight, leave with this. If we're going to be a blessing to people, we have to see past our gates. We have to see past our gates. Seeing past our gates means breaking through the barriers between us and the poor and needy. You know, Jesus didn't just see past the barriers. He broke through the barriers. He touched the people that no one else would. He showed compassion to the people that no one else would show compassion for. He was constantly crossing the barrier. And I think as disciples, we have to be willing to cross the line, to go above and beyond, to do more than the next person is willing to do, because that's what God has called us to. Seeing past our gates means seeing the hurts and the needs of people. Seeing past our gates means asking people their stories, showing genuine concern for who people are. Not ignoring them when you pull up to the street light, not pretending like you're on your phone talking to somebody, right? No, seeing past all those things. It means asking people their stories, taking care of the needs, hearing the needs, seeing the hurts, crossing the line. And here's the cool thing about seeing past our gate. Think about Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 25. It says, whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and one who waters will himself be watered. You see, when we're faithful to God, when we give from what we have, God provides us with everything we need anyway. He's got us. You know, I love that. And one of the greatest things that God gives us is faith. Faith, right? I can't tell you how many times I've gone and I've served. I think about being at Hope Youth Corps as a teenager, and I had the opportunity to go and serve at these different places and locations. No matter where I was, man, when I gave my whole heart, when I gave everything, when I poured myself out, man, I always came back so much more faithful in God's goodness and His grace and His mercy and His love. I'll never forget the smiles that I saw on those kids' faces that I got to serve, and how good that made me feel just to be a blessing to somebody, right? And that's what we get to experience, right? We get to experience being a blessing when we come into contact with those who are in need. That's what God wants for us. That's what he wants for you. But we have to see past the gates. As followers of Jesus, we can't become indifferent, because the moment we do is the moment we miss out on being a blessing. Proverbs 21 verse 13 says, whoever shuts their ears to the cry of the poor will also cry out and not be answered. See, we're not always good at seeing the needs of those around us, but God is calling us to open our eyes and our ears. We have to pray to have hearts like his, to see the needs, and then to do all we can to meet the needs. Like, could you imagine for a minute if we all decided, if we all made a decision to see past ourselves and to see people? I mean, really see people, to listen to their stories, to offer love, to offer comfort and support, clothing, food. I mean, whatever the needs are, we just see people. We see our neighbors. Guys, there's no time to waste. There's no time to waste. By the time the rich man understood that it was too late for him, he does the next best thing. He starts thinking about his family, right? He's in a panic. The rich man tells Abraham, send Lazarus to tell my brothers. I don't want them to end up like me. Abraham's like, nah, like, I'm not going to do that. They have the scriptures just like you did. This wasn't a new teaching. It wasn't something they had never heard before. A resurrection and a miracle wasn't going to convince them if their hearts weren't already responsive to God's word. We can't allow our hearts to become too hard to help. We have to see past our gates now, because later we won't have the opportunity to. And that's not what I want for us as a church. I want us to seize the moment, seize the opportunities that God puts before us to help those who are in need. There's no better time than now. What can you do? Who can you help? Who can you feed? Who can you pray for? Even if it's just one person this week, decide to be a blessing in someone's life. Get to know someone. Ask them their story. Have a genuine concern for them. This is what the world needs, guys. This is what God is calling each of us to do as disciples. So let's see past our gates, be a blessing to those in need, and watch God as he makes our city shine bright through us. Thanks for letting me share. We'll see you next week.